You'll never guess who the LA Times is calling the black face of white supremacy. Their words, of course, not mine. I mean, this is the most despicable thing on the face of the earth. I don't know what it is about leftists that makes them think that they can dehumanize black people if that black person is Republican. That makes them think it's okay to hurl the most disgusting slurs against black people as long as that black person is conservative. Erica D. Smith is the name of this columnist who calls Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy, and oh boy, are we gonna light this up today. I'm Liz Wheeler. Welcome to The Liz Wheeler Show. The black face of white supremacy. I mean, these people, the leftists that headline articles with these kind of slurs, are doing it just for clicks. They are exploiting an independent-minded black conservative just to get clicks. And we're gonna get into this, the content, the meat of this horrible article in just a second. But first, let me talk to you about The Spectator. As the longest-running magazine in the entire world, that's right, The Spectator believes that journalism must be witty and insightful, that ideas should be discussed without the constant threat of cancellation. The Spectator never confuses the serious with the dull. It isn't right-wing or left-wing. It believes in challenging, informing, and entertaining readers. As a publication, it believes that life is bigger than politics, which is why it covers art, culture, food, wine, travel, and life all around, not just politics. Sign up today. I highly encourage this, and you will receive 3 months of both the print and the digital magazine, plus a free Spectator hat. But you have to use the offer code Liz at checkout to redeem the special offer. Just for listeners of this podcast, just go to spectatorworld.com/special offer and use offer code Liz. I personally love The Spectator because it is dedicated to wit, strong reasoning, and brilliant writing. Even if you disagree with the politics, you're guaranteed to be entertained. They have amazing contributors, amazing writers, amazing reporting. From the Biden administration to book reviews, from cancel culture to cultural cuisine, The Spectator will entertain you from cover to cover. So sign up today to get 3 months of The Spectator for free, plus a free Spectator hat when you subscribe at spectatorworld.com/special offer. Use the offer code, remember, offer code Liz at checkout to redeem your offer. That's spectatorworld.com/special offer and offer code Liz. Okay, back to the LA Times, back to the racist liberals who think it's okay to demean a black conservative because he's black and conservative. This is what Erica D. Smith, the author of this piece, writes, and I quote. This is how this piece begins, by the way, begins. She goes, Larry Elder smiled, the smug smile of a black conservative who could very well be liberal California's next governor. First of all, let's hope to God that's true. Let's hope Larry Elder is the next governor of California. California is not as California as so many people say, but that's a conversation for a little bit down the road. Larry Elder smiled, the smug smile of a black conservative who could very well be liberal California's next governor. Then she says, where do you start with the damage Gavin Newsom has done to the state that we both love? This is a question that Larry Elder was given. She's covering this question. Elder leaned forward, she writes, to gaze across the room of white Republicans who had come to hear him speak in Orange County. Rising crime, he said. It's because of this phony narrative that the police are engaging in systemic racism and cops are pulling back, Elder said. When you reduce the possibility of a bad guy getting caught, getting convicted, and getting incarcerated, guess what? Crime goes up. Okay, so that's not very controversial. That's just common sense. But she's setting herself up. Erica D. Smith is setting herself up to say this. This is what she writes. I won't lie, Smith writes. Few things infuriate me more than watching a black person use willful blindness and cherry-picked facts to make overly simplistic arguments that whitewash the complex problems that come along with being black in America. Like a lot of black people, though, I've learned that it's often best just to ignore people like Elder. People who are, as my dad used to say, skinfolk, but not necessarily kinfolk. By the way, this is textbook for liberals telling Larry Elder that because he's conservative, because he's Republican, because he doesn't toe the line of radical leftist ideology, he's not really black, he's not really one of us, he's not really represented by his skin color. Do you know how racist that is? I mean, I'm laughing because it's such an elementary tactic. They're actually using racism against a black man, claiming that he's being racism, but they're actually the ones engaging in racism against him. You're not really black if you dare to be conservative. If you don't vote in a monolith, if you don't obey what we tell you to obey, if you don't toe the line of radical leftist ideology, then you've betrayed your skin color. Newsflash, skin color doesn't define who you are. Your character defines who you are. Your mind defines who you are. You're allowed to be independent-minded and black. Yet these black liberals think that they can boss you around, think that they have this ideological straitjacket that holds you into place. It's racism. It's just racism. That you can be controlled based on the color of your skin. So Erica Smith then writes, it's that perhaps out of spite or perhaps out of an insatiable need for attention, Elder opposes every single public policy idea that's supported by black people to help black people. Okay, first of all, again, every single public policy idea that's supported by black people to help black people. Do you think all black people think the same way? Do you think they all believe the same thing? Because if you think that, if you believe that, you're engaging in racism. You're stereotyping people based on the color of their skin. You're telling people how to behave based on their race. That's racism. You're engaging in racism. So that's first of all. Second of all here, this idea that Democrats and radical leftists support policies that help black people is just so laughably, demonstrably, ridiculously false. I can't let this go past me. I can't let her write this without debunking it. Let's talk about some policies that the radical left supports that hurt black people. How about defund the police? Who's hurt the most when police forces lose their resources, lose their funding, lose their capacity to stop crime? Who is hurt the most? Black people in inner cities, the victims of crime. Black people who are victims of crime, they don't have anybody to call. Their communities become rampant with crime. They are victimized because of narratives like Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter has statistically led to an increase in homicides. More black people have died because of the defund the police narrative coming from Black Lives Matter, because there are fewer arrests, fewer criminals are arrested, and therefore they commit more crimes. This is statistically shown. I think it was something like 2,000 more black people have died in the past year from homicide due to police departments being defunded, which comes from the left. So black people are hurt by a policy pushed by almost every single Democrat who opens their mouth in politics. What about the black business owners in Atlanta, Georgia? Remember? The MLB pulled the All-Star game out of Atlanta because of Georgia's voting law, election security law. And who lost $100 million as a result? The black business owners who counted on the All-Star game to profit for their livelihood, for their business. Black business owners were hurt by this woke narrative being peddled by the left. Now let's talk about education. Who is hurt the most when Democrats kowtow to teachers' unions, when their children are forced to go to public schools, failing public schools? They're not able to send their kids to any other school except the one in their zip code, even if it's a terrible education. Who's hurt the most? Black children are hurt the most. And who's helped the most by school choice programs that allow you to send your child to another school outside of a school district that might have a failing school? Black children are helped the most, yet Democrats, white Democrat politicians, oppose school choice. Now let's talk about minimum wage. Who's hurt the most by minimum wage? Well, low-income people in our country, not only because it's harder to break into the labor force when minimum wage is so high, not only because businesses cut jobs, they cut hours, they cut benefits, but low-income people are hurt the most by minimum wage because what employers do, what businesses do, is they pass on the increased cost of wages to the consumer. So if you as the consumer now have to pay more for your everyday items, who's hurt the most? Low-income Americans, black Americans, white Americans too, but certainly black Americans are hurt by that. Abortion. Let's talk about abortion. How many black babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade? Millions and millions and millions. The black family has been destroyed by the Democratic Party, who doesn't value the black family. The Democrats preach promiscuity in the name of sexual liberation. They preach contraception and abortion. And who's hurt? Black children, black women, black men. The family's been destroyed by the Democrat Party. Gun control. Let's talk about gun control. The Democrats peddle gun control. Who's hurt the most by this? Well, black people. For some reason, the Democrats have successfully, and this is the fault of Republicans should never let a narrative like this take hold, Democrats have made it inappropriate to discuss the black-on-black homicide rate. But gun control makes that worse. If law-abiding citizens have the right to keep and bear arms, have the right to conceal carry, violent crime goes down. But Democrats don't support that. Welfare. And this goes back into the breakdown of the black family. When people rely on welfare instead of the family, they don't need the family. So government welfare programs should only be used for people who need help temporarily. It shouldn't be a way of life. And yet Democrats support a welfare state that's an ongoing cradle-to-grave welfare state. All you have to do is look at inner cities across our country that are controlled by Democrats to know that Democrat policies hurt black people the most. So this narrative that black people everywhere support these policies ideas to help black people is false. False. Just my little tangent on her lies, on Erica Smith's lies. Then she goes on to write, she quotes a chapter head of a Black Lives Matter chapter in our country. Abdullah of Black Lives Matter says, anytime you put a black face on white supremacy, which is what Larry Elder is, there are people who will utilize that as an opportunity to deny white supremacy. They say, how could this be white supremacy? This is a black man. But everything that he's pushing, everything that he stands for, he is advancing white supremacy, end quote. So first of all, let's define some terms here. White supremacy is the belief that white people are, the false belief, the evil belief, the poisonous belief that white people are superior to black people, that black people are inferior to white people. Larry Elder doesn't hold that view. The vast, vast, vast majority of people in our country do not hold that view. That is what white supremacy is. That's the first thing. The second thing is what Larry Elder stands for is limited government and conservative values. That is not white supremacy. That is not racism. Those are the founding principles of our nation. What the left has done is they have taken this term white supremacy and they have discarded the actual definition, the what is it-ness of white supremacy, and they have redefined white supremacy to include any policy position that they don't like. You don't like the free market? Must be white supremacy. You don't like the First Amendment, right to free speech? Must be white supremacy. Don't like our Constitution? Must be based in white supremacy. Don't like the private school system? Must be white supremacy. Everything, don't like our criminal justice system, must be white supremacy. They have redefined this term white supremacy. The Republicans and conservatives, by the way, have allowed them to do this. We shouldn't. We should reject this wholesale. And so what this woman is saying, this chapter chair of Black Lives Matter, is false. Larry Elder doesn't even kinda come close to supporting white supremacy. He's a constitutional conservative. That's all he is. And these leftists don't have an answer to limited government, individual liberties, republic, constitution. They don't have a response to any of this stuff, a factual response. So they resort to insults. They resort to redefining words. Instead, what they're offering, these radical leftists are offering socialism. They're offering Marxism. They're offering anti-capitalism. They're offering defund the police. They're offering prison abolition. They're offering to abolish the nuclear family. That's the policy positions of the people opposing Larry Elder. And so again, who is hurt the most by socialism, Marxism, anti-capitalism, defunding the police, abolishing prisons, abolishing the nuclear family? Who is hurt the most? Black Americans. This piece is the most ridiculous, evil piece that I've read in a long time. And this is why, by the way, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day we were talking about politics, and my friend was saying, you know, I wish the people would just be nice to each other. I wish we could cool this environment in our nation, this political environment. I wish we could all just be a little more clear-minded and debate our differences, find our common ground. And I rejected that. I rejected it wholesale. I don't believe in centrism. I think it's dead. Because what we have here is we have two factions in our country now who have fundamentally different definitions of what is good and what is evil. Conservatives believe that the individual is good, that the individual is free, that we are created by God, endowed by God with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that government exists to secure those rights. And the other side believes that killing babies by abortion is good. They believe that castrating little boys, chemically castrating little boys, is good. And they believe that individual mindedness, if you're black and you are a conservative, that makes you evil. Don't be part of a party that does this. Don't be part of a movement that defines people based on the color of their skin and goes to this extent to demonize a black man for the crime of thinking for himself and being conservative. Larry Elder deserves to win the gubernatorial race in the state of California. Gavin Newsom deserves to be kicked out of office. The recall effort against him is well deserved. Democrats are desperate. That's why they're resorting to this kind of, I don't even know the word, this despicable, disgusting assaults against him. All right, what I want to talk about next is a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the California elections. How do we actually have faith that the elections in California are going to be fair after what happened in the 2020 election? And we're going to talk about that in a second, but first I want to talk to you about Truebill. Do you guys know why free trials for subscription services automatically renew without your consent on a month-to-month basis? The answer to that is it's a business scam. That's the simple fact of the matter. It's a business scam. And here's what I would tell you today. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. There's a solution to this problem. The solution is called Truebill. Truebill is a new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you either don't need, you don't want, or maybe you just forgot about if you're like me. On average, people who use Truebill save up to $720 a year, which is a significant amount of money in my opinion. Because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. You just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Or if you don't want to do it yourself, your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel your unwanted subscriptions so that you don't have to. So download Truebill today to take control of your subscriptions. They've helped over 2 million users, by the way, and helped them save $100 million, which is a lot of money. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/Liz. Go right now, Truebill.com/Liz. It could save you thousands of dollars a year. Truebill.com/Liz. It's worth it. You'll save yourself a lot of money. So how do we have faith in the California recall election when California is engaged in universal mail-in voting? There is an answer to this, but first I want to talk just a second about the vulnerabilities of what's happening. So in California right now, there are 20 million ballots that have been sent out to, I want to say voters in the state, but we don't know if they're eligible voters. 20 million ballots have been sent out to people in California without being requested by the people who will be sending the ballots back in. 20 million. I mean, this is obviously ripe for fraud. It's vulnerable for fraud. We've already seen examples of very shady things happening with these mail-in ballots. For example, there's an investigation because there were 300 unopened mail-in ballots that were found in a car. And this car was parked outside of a convenience store in Torrance, California. Near these unopened ballots, these 300 unopened ballots, mail-in ballots, there was a loaded gun and there was narcotics. So how do we have confidence that this election is going to be fair when we have such vulnerability to fraud? And here's my answer. My answer is overwhelming victory. The only way to ensure that the Democrats don't cheat, that there's not fraud, that there's nothing shady that happens is overwhelming victory. Go out and vote. Talk to your friends. You don't have to be conservative to want Gavin Newsom out. In fact, there's a growing coalition in California of Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter what your previous political convictions were, who know that Gavin Newsom is a tyrant. He has been violating people's rights. There are something like 14,000 businesses, your businesses in the state of California, who are permanently closed because they couldn't survive the anti-science lockdowns mandated by Gavin Newsom. He doesn't deserve to be in the governor's mansion. Recall him. And I have hope of overwhelming victory, actually, even in the face of these 20 million mail-in ballots that are ripe for fraud. I have hope because in order to have this recall happen, the recall effort had to have 1.5 million signatures to bring this to fruition. Guess how many they collected? 2.1 million. They needed 1.5 million, they collected 2.1 million. That's how you do overwhelming victory. People of California, make this happen. Make this happen. Get involved. September 14th is the day. Make sure people that you know the repercussions of this recall election. Make sure they vote to recall Gavin Newsom. This is critically important in the fight against radical leftist ideology in our nation. Also critical in the fight against radical leftist ideology, Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Yes, he is a Republican in name only. He is one of Pelosi's Republicans, as I like to call him, from the state of Illinois. This is quite amusing. I don't want to see any Republican lose a seat in Congress, but when you have a Republican that votes with Democrats, are they really a Republican? Is that really someone worth having on your team? Congressman Kinzinger may actually lose his seat, not because the voters dislike him per se, I don't know, He may lose his seat to redistricting. So we talked about redistricting last week, how in the face of the 2020 census data, states across the country are redrawing their congressional maps, their congressional representation maps. And because of this redistricting, it may actually give Republicans an advantage as long as they don't gerrymander to the point where it's challenged in court. Because these redistricting, these lines are drawn by state legislatures, and Republicans control the majority of state legislatures in our country. Well, Kinzinger may actually lose his seat to redistricting simply because his district may be eliminated completely. Completely eliminated. Imagine if that were to happen. He'd be completely gone. Now, this is the man who cried. He cried on camera talking about January 6th. I mean, not exactly your power move here. He bought into the leftist narratives about January 6th, which we know are completely false. So if he wants to remain in Congress, Kinzinger would have to maybe run in a different district. And we all know that Illinois is, in general, very blue state. It's very leftist, so he may have to run in a district where he would not win. I would like to make a prediction here. I think he's going to try to run for governor or run for the Senate in the state of Illinois. But his time in Congress may be very, very short. And there's some poetic justice for a Republican in name only to lose his seat like this. We'll see what happens. Some teenagers in Washington state. The story was actually brought to light by an unvaccinated teenager at a high school called Eatonville High School. This is south of Seattle, Washington. These teenagers were forced, they're actually student athletes, by the way. They were forced to wear ankle tracking bracelets because of COVID-19. Again, the story was brought to light because unvaccinated teenagers were forced to wear these tracking bracelets, these ankle tracking bracelets. Turns out the school has then pivoted and vaccinated student athletes are forced to wear these tracking bracelets too. I don't see what that distinction, it's a distinction without a difference. It's still so Orwellian to put a child in what usually we'd see these kind of tracking bracelets on felons who were out on parole. The parents of these students weren't allowed to photograph their children with these tracking bracelets off. A student was actually asked to remove the tracking bracelet before a parent saw them. This is how Orwellian this is. Now, the school justifies this by saying, well, we're not using the GPS for tracking in that sense. We just want to know, how close these students are to each other because these are high contact or medium contact sports, volleyball, football, basketball, wrestling, soccer, etc. And the purpose of these trace tag monitors, that's what they're called, they have an alarm that goes off if a student athlete gets too close to another person. These leftists have not only abandoned science, they are abandoning humanity. They don't want human contact between young people. Do you know how destructive this is going to be to the human psyche? Like, we're going to have COVID syndrome, which has nothing to do with the virus, nothing to do with the actual virus's impact on the human body. It's going to be a mental disorder that young people suffer based on the government mandated this stuff, the government mandated nonsense that's being forced on young people. I read an article the other day that babies who were born during the time of COVID have 10 points or have lost 10 points of IQ because they don't see facial expressions because of masks. Which is why, again, I would never talk to my child with a mask on my face. Even when I'm flying, I pull my mask down at any time possible to talk to my child because I am determined she will not suffer. She will not suffer anything because the radical left abandons science. So these monitors, by the way, these ankle tracking bracelets, were paid for with taxpayer money, your money and my money. And the point, of course, is to contact trace, to quarantine. And parents were supposedly given a sheet to sign, a permissions sheet, but it was under threat. If they didn't sign it, then their child can't play a sport at the school. So what choice do they really have? Pull their child out of school? That's certainly what I would have done. I would pull my child out of school. I would never allow them to be subjected to this. But one parent said she wasn't even informed, and this was put on her daughter without informed consent. The school apologized for that, but I don't buy it. Again, these monitors, these ankle monitor tracking bracelets were purchased with federal coronavirus relief money. This is shocking. If this is not something that blows your mind, then you're too adjusted to the tyranny of the radical left. Let's talk about Afghanistan for a second. The images and videos coming out of Kabul airport are gut-wrenching. They'll make you absolutely sick to your stomach. And we talked about this yesterday on the show. This is Joe Biden's legacy. This is Joe Biden's fault that 3 terror groups, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS-K, are resurging in Afghanistan. This was a political decision from the Biden administration. This was not inevitable. We did not have to lose this war. We were not forced into defeat. We were not forced to withdraw. This was a choice that Joe Biden made that has now harmed U.S. military members and dozens of Afghans. There is actual blood on Joe Biden's hands. And the corruption that we're seeing from the Biden administration, the corruption that we're seeing in Afghanistan is almost mind-blowing. The Taliban controls so much U.S. military equipment. And I talked about this yesterday because I said, if an enlisted Marine lost control of his equipment the way that the U.S. government has done, the enlisted Marine would be court-martialed. But when the Pentagon allows the Taliban to take control of U.S. military equipment, the Pentagon spokesman just kind of shrugs it off. Let me tell you some of the numbers here. This is what's really shocking. So a government watchdog group here in the United States called Open the Books says that the U.S. military is leaving behind 75,000 vehicles, 600,000 weapons, and 208 aircraft in Afghanistan. 75,000 vehicles, 600,000 weapons, and 208 aircraft. Do you know what that means? That means that we are literally giving the Taliban U.S. arms and the capacity to kill us for probably the next decade. I mean, when we're talking about 75,000 military vehicles, that's like 50,000 tactical vehicles, 20,000 Humvees. We're talking about mine-resistant vehicles. We're talking about armored personnel carriers. We're talking about things that you use to wage war against another people, and we are allowing the Taliban to control that. I'm sorry, we are not allowing the Taliban to control that. Joe Biden is allowing the Taliban to control that. It's worse than that, actually. The Taliban has recently appointed to a position of power a man who was freed by the Obama-Biden administration from Gitmo. Not only was this man, his name is Mohammed Nabi Omari, not only was he housed at Gitmo, not only did the Obama-Biden administration free him, he was freed in the prisoner swap for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. And now he's in a leadership position with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Joe Biden, I mean, every single step that has led to what we're seeing now in Afghanistan could have been prevented. We could have won this war decisively. We could have left a small residual force that simply prevented terrorists from ever taking hold of the country, and we could have gotten most of our personnel out of there. We could have won this war. But Obama and Biden chose politically to lose this war. They chose politically to release terrorists from Gitmo, who are now in charge of the Taliban. They chose politically to admit defeat and then to blame the Afghan people, the Afghan military, as if that's why we were there in the first place. It is not. We were there to protect our country. Meanwhile, the Taliban has started collecting weapons from civilians. It's basically gun control at the hands of the Taliban. The Taliban claims that civilians no longer need personal weapons for personal protection. This is what the Taliban says. Quote, a spokesman, by the way, for the Taliban said this: "We understand people kept weapons for personal safety. They can now feel safe. We're not here to harm innocent civilians." Are you kidding me? The Taliban's been beating people with chains. The Taliban subjects women to absolutely unspeakable atrocities, forced marriages, rape. You don't need a weapon for personal safety? This is why in the United States, by the way, conservatives fight against gun control, because we know in the history of the world, the evil of human nature, when a group, an organization, or a government tries to confiscate weapons from a citizenry, they do so in order to enable their tyranny and their abuse and their oppression, and sometimes death. Because an armed citizenry can rise up against tyranny. A disarmed citizenry cannot. That is what the Taliban is doing right now. They're collecting personal weapons from private citizens so that these citizens have no recourse against the abuses that the Taliban will inflict upon them. This is the legacy of Joe Biden. And by the way, I know there's been 20 years of corruption, 20 years of bad decision-making, 20 years of government bureaucrats getting us entangled in this extremely expensive trillion-dollar war that we've never decisively won. And it's impossible to trust the people at the top. It's impossible to trust our intelligence agencies. It's impossible to trust even those at the Pentagon now. The military is infiltrated with these woke leftists who won't actually win a war. They'd rather teach people critical race theory and teach people, force officers in the United States military to affirm that a man can be a woman if he wants to be, if he identifies as a woman. How do we trust anything that our government is telling us when we have the former director of the CIA, I'm talking about Michael Hayden, General Michael Hayden, who literally issued a tweet about wanting to throw MAGA folks to the Taliban. This is his tweet. You can see it on the screen. For those of you listening, I'll read it to you. There was a tweet from some random user that says, "Can we send the MAGA-wearing unvaxxed to Afghanistan? No use sending that plane back empty." General Michael Hayden, former CIA director, retweeted that and said, "Good idea." This is what our intelligence agencies, this is what the administrative state, this is what the left thinks of you and I. They would rather send us to Afghanistan into the jaws of radical jihadists who would torture, rape, and kill us than tolerate us in our own country. And we're supposed to trust these people. We're supposed to defer to their expertise. We're supposed to believe them. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, the Taliban is using a weird tactic to try to gain support from leftists around the world. The Taliban wants to revamp their image, they say. They want to be legitimized as the governing force in Afghanistan. And the way that they're trying to appeal to the left is they're claiming they want to fight climate change. The Taliban wants to fight climate change. They have a cultural commission now, the Taliban does. And this is what their cultural commission told Newsweek. They said, "We hope not only to be recognized by regional countries, but the entire world at large as the legitimate representative government of the people of Afghanistan." The representative government. Are women represented? Are non-jihadists represented? Are children represented? I don't think so. These people, obviously, these jihadists are horrible liars because that's what they do. They're jihadists. But this is what they're doing. They say, "We believe the world has a unique opportunity of coming together to tackle the challenges not only facing us, but the entire humanity. These challenges, ranging from world security and climate change, need to be collective efforts of all and cannot be achieved if we exclude or ignore an entire people who have been devastated by imposed wars for the past 4 decades, blah, 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 blah." The Taliban's trying to legitimize themselves in the eyes of the left by claiming they're fighting climate change. I wish I could say that this won't work, but I'm worried that leftists will buy into it. So let me just remind the left. The Taliban ruled Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001, during which time they murdered and raped, they committed massacres, they subjugated and abused women in horrific ways, same with journalists. If you want to talk about the actual climate, which we really shouldn't even need to talk about, they burned fertile land on purpose. They engaged in an illegal timber trade. But again, that doesn't even matter because the Taliban harbored terrorists who killed us. They sold women into sex slavery. They abused and subjugated people under Sharia law. If leftists fall for this, I don't even have the words. I don't know a more diplomatic way to say it. If leftists fall for this, they are beyond idiotic. They are evil as well. But the Taliban thinks that they can get leftists on their side by claiming to fight climate change. Well, the leftists are not the smartest people on the face of the earth. We know this. The leftists just passed the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act in Congress in the House. It was a 219 to 212 vote. It was along party lines. This bill now heads to the Senate. I do not think it will pass in the Senate because, well, the Senate's a 50-50 split. They need a majority over there, and that's not going to happen. But here's the thing. This is not a centrist bill. The Democrats, in the wake of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, failing, the Democrats are claiming the John R. Lewis Act is the compromise. This is the centrist bill. Absolutely not. The John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act essentially is a federal power grab of state and local elections. Remember, our election system are not dictated by the federal government. Each state has control of their own elections, even presidential elections. But this voting bill from the Democrats, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, requires state and local governments to get approval from the DOJ, the Department of Justice, before they can actually make any change to any election law. So if we have a Democrat administration, the Democrat administration wouldn't let any Republican state make any changes to their own election processes if the Democrats at the federal level don't want those changes to be made. So what does that amount to? Well, it's a partisan federal takeover of elections, and it should be rejected by we the people and, of course, our representatives in Congress. So the fight against mask mandates in schools is ongoing. Parents are stepping up, standing up for their kids against these anti-science mask mandates. And one woman at a school board meeting was actually handcuffed for wearing her mask incorrectly. Take a listen to this. Take a look at this for those watching.
So these are, I love these guys. I know these guys, but they are intimidating us. They are forced. There's no law. There's no statute. This is a public meeting. We have broken no laws, and they are now trying to physically intimidate myself and a few other women who have our masks underneath our noses. Okay. So are you gonna put your hands on me? No, I'm not gonna put your hands on me. Okay, so I would like to know what crime I committed. If you're going to put your, this is all on Facebook Live right now. Officer B. Hamley, we have officer. This is the Monroe County Police Department, and this officer, your name, sir? Henderson, Officer Henderson. So they are now. They have their hands on me now. They have their hands on me now. Okay, they have their hands on me now, and I guess this is the way it is now. I can't believe this is happening. I don't have my purse.
We'll get it.
I'll get it for you.
And so we're all on Facebook Live right now, guys. These are the officers.
Okay.
Monroe County Sheriffs, Officer Hanley, and they are escorting me out. Can we have witnesses, please, guys, besides myself? Thank you.
Okay.
And I can't believe this is happening. They're good. Oh, now.
Put your hands behind your back. Right.
We'll get it. My phone.
That's the point we're getting to. If you wear your mask incorrectly, you might be handcuffed. Handcuffed. There's nothing else that needs to be said about that story. It speaks for itself. You wear your mask under your chin, jail. Handcuffed. Horrible. Meanwhile, an actual crisis is taking place, and it has nothing to do with masks. The actual crisis is down at the border. The U.S. Border Patrol, I believe this was in the Tucson sector in Arizona, posted this on their Facebook account. They found a cloned Customs and Border Protection vehicle that was being used to transport illegal aliens. Take a look at this picture. For those of you listening, let me describe this. It's a white SUV with a green stripe and the writing that appears to be Border Patrol. Everyone recognizes it. It's a counterfeit vehicle. This is what the smugglers, the cartels, the coyotes are doing now. They're actually counterfeiting Border Patrol vehicles. This is what the Tucson sector posted on Facebook. Quote, "This is not a Border Patrol vehicle. Homeland Security investigations and Border Patrol agents from Tucson Station foiled a smuggling attempt using a cloned vehicle and a fake uniform. The driver and 10 migrants were taken into custody." End quote. But where in the world is Kamala Harris, the border czar? Where in the world is this woman who's supposed to be in charge of the crisis happening at the border? We are being duped by drug cartels, by Mexican drug cartels, by coyotes, by human traffickers. And Kamala Harris, she's probably laughing like a maniac somewhere about nothing, something that's not funny, because that's what she does. She's doing nothing to stop this, and the mainstream media is not holding them accountable. The Biden administration's legacy 7-8 months into their administration is just abysmal. It's embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing. All right, on that note, that's really all there needs to be said. But before we go today, I want to thank our local VIP of the week, a new member to the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals, Josh Avina. Josh, good to have you. Welcome aboard. Please introduce yourself, post on Locals on our Liz Wheeler Show community page. Tell us about yourself. Tell us why you're conservative, what brought you to this community. We are glad to have you on board. A lot of fun things happen on Locals. There's a lot of exclusive VIP supporter benefits, including early access to interviews with thought leaders and people of consequences around our nation. We have discussions on all kinds of issues. There's ad-free access to the episodes. All kinds of fun stuff happen over there. Josh, we are really happy to have you on board. Thanks for joining us. Anybody else interested in joining our community can go to lizwheelershow.com/locals. And on that note, we're done for today. Before we're back, remember to think for yourself. Don't defer to government authority. Use critical thought, reject critical theory, question authority, follow the facts, and don't let government or corporate wokeism or cultural Marxism or anybody bully you into being a sheep. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for watching. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. The Liz Wheeler Show is produced by Jonathan Hay, executive producer Chad Abbott, director of photography Kevin McRoberts, editor Alejandro Figuerella, assistant editor Michael Wall, sound mixer Robin Fenderson, post-production manager Victoria Metzel, director of marketing Emily Washler, production and talent coordinator Matt Toffler, and senior publicist Patricia Jackson. This has been a Soundfront production.